What is going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Very Cold Lasagna, the podcast that houses a safe and open listening platform for all the casual, cold, and dumb takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. I am your host, DylanLasagna. Welcome to a special episode here today because we are here to do the following. It's Very Cold Lasagna's 100th episode, SHITTACULAR! That is right. We are here to commemorate and celebrate 100 episodes and 1 year of Very Cold Lasagna. Yes, it is our 100th episode, 1 year, SHITTACULAR. SHITTACULAR, whatever you want to call it. And yes, it is a SHITTACULAR because a lot of things can happen. A lot of wild things can be said here on this show. So take it for what you will in this SHITTACULAR of a podcast. So first things first, I'm obviously your host, Dylan of this freezing cold podcast, this icy and spicy lasagna podcast. And first thing I want to do is obviously say thank you to each and every one of the people, the few people that listen to this show as of right now, that listen to the show, take their time out of the day to listen to me, the people that are subscribed to me on YouTube or have decided to follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or on any of the audio platforms. You know, even if it's just a small amount of people over the span of 100 episodes, over the span of a year, you know, it still means something to me. It still really does mean something to me. And sure, we're not at the point yet where we're really growing, but hopefully, you know, as we enter year 2, we get to that point. And, you know, it's still up to me to make that happen. So speaking of the year that was, the so-called rookie year of Very Cold Lasagna, let's get into it. Let's talk about pretty much the last year of Very Cold Lasagna, because pretty much what this episode is kind of like a hangover show. It's pretty much a kind of like a old icebox. It's like our own old icebox, retrospective, or you know, our recap of the last 100 episodes, the last year of this podcast. So I think a couple things went right for me in terms of the podcast, and some of those things, I think the biggest thing actually is, well, not like, oh, I kind of gave up. Like, I didn't give up on this show, because there were a couple points in time, like throughout the back half portion of these 100 episodes, where I was just like, okay, I don't feel like doing this. I really don't feel like making an episode. I don't feel like putting my notes down or like researching a topic that I need to make an episode on. And it's just like, there's just like a couple points in time where I just need a mental break from it all. And there were points that I did, but at the same time, of course, I want to take a break and, you know, just get my head straight, and taking those breaks really helped me. Really helped me get it together and at least try to put out what I can, like in terms of quality. And that's something I should be focusing more on when it comes to the podcast, more quality over quantity. Yes, we've gotten 200 episodes, but you know, a little more quality wouldn't hurt. And I think the next biggest thing would be, you know, like locking down the last topic areas that I want to like speak on in the next near future. And that's obviously the 3 things that I always say at the beginning of each show: pro wrestling and sports, mainly the NFL. Of course, there will come a point where I, you know, kind of more broaden my horizons a bit, simply because pro wrestling is kind of a dying breed. But, you know, pro wrestling is still a near and dear thing to my heart, even if it's dying a bit. But the NFL, it's just continuing to get, well, despite all the rules, it's getting better in terms of quality. But still, there still may come a time where there still may come a time where I could expand to other sports as well if one interests me. But pro wrestling and the NFL, like two of the big things that I really have a passion for, really like talking about, and I can just sit in front of here and just ramble on relentlessly for however long it takes. And then I think the last big thing is, I think my biggest challenge in most recently, and that was the March Madness in March, this past March, in the form of the NFL season recap series. I think while yes, it was challenging, it was kind of time consuming as well, and also a little bit sometimes unprepared. As also, I do feel like it was like a big yet rewarding challenge, in terms of the viewership and the listens somewhat, because and also I got to learn a lot of things in terms of not just my team but the other teams, because keep in mind when I do weekly recaps, when I did weekly recaps throughout the 2021 season, I only watched like a few games that were on TV, and then the games that weren't on TV, I just watched highlights of it, because that's maybe those are games that I didn't really care about, or maybe it was a game that was just not televised. So with the season recap series, I can actually like go through each team, point through like their biggest flaws, or like some of the biggest positives in what may have been a down season or a good season for them, and see what they need for the next season to hopefully succeed, or maybe not at all. Again, big challenge, but it was a fun one as well. Of course, there wouldn't be any right things if there were a few things that also went wrong. I think, of course, the biggest thing is I'd still wish that we'd grow a little bit. We'd grow the follower base a little bit, both on all sides. Maybe it's because the things I talk about, are irrelevant or not so interesting, and that's on me. That's on me sometimes. Maybe people are not as open to the topics I talk about, or maybe it's just a chance of luck. But sometimes those things hurt a little bit inside. But hey, you just gotta live with it. You just gotta live with it and try to get better from there. Another thing that kind of went wrong, and I'd say this in the last 7 months, was the big drop off in pro wrestling content. And the reason why there was such a big drop off, if for the people that only watch or listen to my pro wrestling content, is because, well, pro wrestling is just very bad right now. It's the pro wrestling, whether it's WWE, AEW, or whatever company that we watch, New Japan, TNA, Ring of Honor is under All Elite Wrestling now. It's just so bad right now. It is just so bad. Everything just feels the same. Everything just looks the same. WWE and AEW, like, sure, AEW doesn't have that that sports entertainment style, even though they technically are sports entertainment, but everything just feels too indie-fied. Everything feels too indie-fied, not enough stories, not enough interesting characters. And for what it's worth, NXT 2.0 is at least trying a little bit, but not enough to get me intrigued, to be honest with you. And AEW, like, I think their biggest problem is that they're falling too much under the WWE tree a little bit, in terms of snatching up all their rotten apples. And what I mean by that is all the jobbers that were released, and as well as they're falling in the trap of the bad habits that WWE has been doing, building up the especially building up to pay-per-views, so late that it doesn't leave me intrigued. As well as giving away free matches on television only to get a subpar rating. And And it's just bad. It's just really, really bad. And WWE's no better either. They don't have any interesting stories or characters, and it's even like their decision making, like whatever they put out on TV, is also bad. So yeah, that's why I don't really talk about pro wrestling as much right now, because there's just nothing intriguing to see. I mean, aside from WrestleMania 38, it's just not great. It's just not great right now. Another thing is, in terms of the presentation, it's just like this. I keep hitting my little mic arm here, and if you noticed, in the last couple of episodes, I've been having audio issues. I try to correct them as much as I can, and I don't know if it's the mic or something, but I at least try to correct it in post-production. But I'm trying to improve the audio quality. Maybe I need a better mic. I've been using I think it's a Blue Yeti for the last 2 years, on other things before I started this podcast. But I don't know. It sounds like, if you didn't listen to this like post production, it would sound like it would really sound like that. It really would sound like that. Some other things that like some other small things that went wrong were just getting out NFL content late, and sometimes not at all, and just trying to rush out getting like NFL recaps or picks out during the 2021 season. Like, it was not good. It was really not good to do that. It just felt like, I don't know, I just felt under pressure, under like one of those really tight deadlines to get just get that out. Hopefully when the 2022 season starts, I get a more streamlined schedule when it comes to NFL content during the fall. I'm not sure what that'll look like yet, but we'll see what happens. Now to continue on with our Hangover show, celebrating 100 episodes. I know, not being too fancy. I just wanted to talk about some of my favorite episodes, some of my favorite discussions. I think one of my favorite episodes has to be one of the very first ones that we did back last year, and that was the AEW Revolution 2021 review. I remember watching that show, not really paying attention to the storylines that were going on into that pay-per-view. Like, during that time in 2021, I was really, really getting to the point, not as bad as I am now, but I was getting to the point where I was just not really that invested into wrestling anymore. So I go into this pay-per-view, and I was just so unimpressed by anything that was happening. Everything just felt copy and paste in terms of all the matches. Everything, it's like, oh, let's put on a circus act for everybody. Let's put on like a Cirque du Soleil, or whatever it's called, for everybody. There's no clear-cut story, no video packages. Everyone was having a spot orgy for almost 4 hours in each match. And most matches were pretty sloppy. The only interesting things from that pay-per-view was Sting wrestling his first match in 6 years, and I think it was like a no disqualification tag team match with Darby Allin and I think Freedom Revival or whatever. And then you had Max Caster, who was still like an up-and-coming star at the time. I think he was in a Casino Battle Royale, or I think it was a tag team match or whatever. But he did this rap on the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, and I forgot what it was about, but he had ounces of charisma. He showed his potential of what he can be in terms of a character. But then you cap things off what was a very boring pay-per-view, and a very bad one at that, with probably one of the worst endings to a show overall. Like, so Kenny Omega was defending his AEW championship against Jon Moxley. Omega retained, and then he sets off like this timer, that's set to explode the entire arena. And then here comes Eddie Kingston, and then he runs out to protect Jon Moxley from the explosion, and then I remember this. It was not a big ass explosion, but it was sparklers. You know, the sparklers that you get on 4th of July for like, what, $1 or something from your local fireworks stand. Yeah, it was that all over the ring. It was like, shh. It was so stupid. It looked so unrealistic. It made Eddie Kingston look like a damn idiot. So, holy hell. Revolution was such a bad pay-per-view, and people paid $50 for a wet fart ending. Oh man, it was such a terrible pay-per-view, but so like kind of like funny to rant on. Speaking of rants, a month later, I ranted on Monday Night Raw. I think it was like after WrestleMania, at WrestleMania 37, which by the way I didn't watch. One of the episodes I did prior to that was ranting about WrestleMania and how it's going to be one of the worst, probably the worst WrestleMania at the time. And I was just so fed up with the build, so fed up of Daniel Bryan being added to the main event in Roman Reigns and Edge. So I ended up not watching that, but then I was inspired from, I think it was like episode 19 at the time, to just rant about Monday Night Raw and its like constant problems, because not only of how terrible the show is, but how god awful and how like mindless the hardcore wrestling community just continues to watch it, regardless how terrible it is. Like it was just so stupid, and they still do it today. They still do it today under the excuse of, oh, we have to watch it because we have to review it for clout. Yeah. And yet I still see people like certain people that after I made that episode, and at the end of that episode, I challenged like the people that are reviewing it for clout to not watch and review Raw for at least a week. And then I guess it got so bad after that they eventually stopped watching and reviewing Raw completely. So I mean, at least I did something. For like the very few people that ended up hearing me out, and even if they didn't, they got a message. So one of my favorite rants because of just how bad Raw was. Another good episode for me was like episode 31. We did the little like rebrand. But it wasn't so much about the rebrand of Very Cold Lasagna, but it was more about, you know, a little step forward for pro wrestling. And that was pretty much pro wrestling going back to live touring, even though AEW had already done it like a month before at the time. So this episode was pretty much highlighting, like, even though it had many negatives, there were at least a few positives to come out of it. And I think the biggest positive to come out of that COVID era of wrestling in 2020 to mid 2021 was Roman Reigns, the real rise of Roman Reigns as probably the top star in pro wrestling. Sure, you could say what you want of how like stale he has gotten. I agree with that. Roman Reigns has gotten kind of stale, but still, he remains a top star with his charisma, his energy that he brings, and the overall look of his presentation in the Tribal Chief. So this episode was pretty much just highlighting all the things that happened during the COVID era and my personal thoughts on it. It was just like, finally, this is over. And then more AEW stuff. They had an event called Grand Slam back in 2021, just a couple of weeks after All Out. It was pretty much a special event Dynamite and Rampage show because they were in a tennis stadium in New York. And this was the last thing that I talked about. This is the last thing I talked about when it comes to wrestling before I took like this 7-month long break. And let's just say, yeah, I was pretty much done. I was pretty much done watching wrestling for that time because I wasted about 4 hours watching that Bore Fest. And if you watch it at 2 times speed, yeah, it's still 4 hours of a waste of time. And the reason for that was, aside from the typical indie wrestling, spot orgy, no story bullshit. AEW just blew their load, and this would kind of like be a sign of things to come to the present day. AEW blowing their load. AEW just blowing their load when it comes to major announcements, major surprises. Oh, speaking of major announcements, Tony Khan Man is going to have another one this coming week on Dynamite. But anyway, that's besides the point. This was just a bland scam of AEW blowing their load in a single week, whether it's on Dynamite or Rampage. But most importantly, Rampage, because you had this opening match, like this 60-minute sleeping, like, snooze fest between Daniel Bryan, or whatever his name is, Bryan Danielson now, and Kenny Omega, who was a world champion at the time, on free TV, 60 minutes with commercials in between. And it was so boring. It was so boring. And then they went to the time limit in a draw and ended in a tie. And then nothing happened after that. Brian didn't. I don't think Brian got his rematch, or I don't know if he got a non-title victory after that. But then they just immediately went after, like, on the next, I think it was the next couple of episodes of Dynamite. Since I was checking out like Twitter highlights or something, that Adam Page, he got his world title match at Full Gear or something, and then he won the world title, and he's currently the AEW champion right now. And then in the main event of the Dynamite Grand Slam, Ruby Riott, or Ruby Soho, who was just fresh off of debuting at All Out, lost her title match that she won in that Casino Battle Royale to Britt Baker. She lost her title match. And look where this so-called runaway is now. She ran away to AEW Dark. She's doing nothing. She's doing absolutely nothing. They blew their load so early that, well, what the hell's Daniel Bryan doing now? And, well, I understand Kenny Omega, even though I don't like the guy. Kenny Omega is recovering from injuries. Hangman Adam Page is pretty boring as champion. And Ruby Soho's on Dark. Britt Baker just lost the Women's Championship, and I guess, I don't know, she's taking some time off. So, that's something. So, this was just a a very boring stadium show for AEW that just gets so overpraised. So overpraised. I was just so upset because I wasted 4 hours watching that shit. It was like the tipping point. I was just like, I'm done. I'm focusing on the NFL going forward. Speaking of the NFL, one of my favorite episodes is a very recent one, and that is the season recap for my San Francisco 49ers. It's pretty much because, me being a 49ers fan, I always hope for the best for my team. Obviously, in 2020, that wasn't the case. But 2021, it was just like, a crazy experience. And this was a fun episode for me because, this one was kind of interesting, in that preseason, there was just so many like moving parts when it came to, is Jimmy G going to be the starting quarterback, or is it going to be Trey Lance? When is Trey Lance, their third overall pick from 2021 that they gave away several picks for, is he going to make the jump at some point in the season? And then you go through this very stupid stretch where they went 2-4, and you get some very shitty losses to the Indianapolis Colts and the Arizona Cardinals. And then all of a sudden you start winning. And then when they start winning, I go on this very weird prophecy of, they're going to win these games and then get a wild card berth. And then they get smashed in the first round by a better, more quality playoff opponent. And then they don't do it. And they actually keep slapping me in the face. And then they actually end up in the NFC Championship game against the LA Rams. And sure, they don't win it, but they actually ended up leaving me a little bit impressed. A little bit. But still, this was a season, this past season by the San Francisco 49ers was kind of like, I don't know, not like an ultimately wasted season, but it was a little so-so. And that was in spite of how much Jimmy Garbage Fail and, I guess to a degree, Kyle Shanahan were trying to give it away. Now, of course, there are things that are to consider when it comes to their offseason. Was and still is at this point, their top priority is handing the keys to Trey Lance. But, well, let's just say that's another discussion for another time. So those are just my top episodes. Some of my top discussions include that lights out match between Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa. And now I get it. Some people call this match overrated. Others call it the greatest match of all time. For me, it's a little bit down the middle now that I look at it a year later. At the time, I thought it was like one of the better women's matches in AEW. But now that I look at it, I mean, it still kind of is. But when you look at the follow-up after that, yeah, things haven't really gone in good directions for especially Thunder Rosa, man. Britt Baker, I mean, sure, she had a successful women's title run, but she kind of got a little repetitive in the later stretches of her women's championship reign, and her competition was severely lacking. And Thunder Rosa, she became a total SJW. She became a total social justice warrior. She went woke, and that was pretty much amplified by how much she hated the Brock Lesnar mariachi thing, as well as pretty much going into that what was that St. Patrick's Day Slam a couple weeks ago, actually a month ago, her steel cage match against Britt Baker. Yeah, and overall, you know, that follow up to that pretty good lights out match was just not really great. And going into it either wasn't that great either. There was not really much of a story, and Thunder Rosa wasn't doing anything notable. She was either on AEW Dark or on the other NWA Power Show, and that feud just got restarted out of nowhere. And Britt Baker lost that women's championship to Thunder Rosa without any significant boost. So, I mean, good match by Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa, no matter what people say. But that follow up, the long term, I mean, it just not good at all. Another good highlight, good discussion that I had was my filthy casual draft scouting last year when I just weeks before the NFL draft. It was fun, but just very challenging too, because there were a lot of good players in that NFL draft, and obviously in the NFL right now, but there's just so many schools, so many prospects to keep up. That's just why I'm not into college football that much. But I just narrowed it down to the top ranked prospects and a couple under the radar prospects as well. And let's see if I can do. I challenge myself to scout and evaluate the then incoming draft players and see where they would go. And to some varying degree, it kind of worked, but also at the same time, it just proved that I can't scout players for shit. Another good discussion is the retro review I did of the WWE and WCW invasion of 2001. At the time when I did that video, episode, it was the 20th anniversary of the storyline, and it was kind of an interesting 20th anniversary because that particular storyline was polarizing for many reasons. If you want to watch that episode or listen to it as well, it was just so many different accounts, so many different reasons, and it just left me with a lot of what ifs towards the end, because that invasion storyline had so much potential to succeed, but it was kind of it's just kind of meh in the end. And then last but not least, most recently, the LA Chargers. It's just typical LA Chargers. When it came to the 2021 season, when I did that season recap of them, it was just so much potential wasted. So much potential wasted by not Justin Herbert, because he had a great season, but by many other factors. The defense, Brandon Staley kind of choking it up in crucial situations. They had a good chance to at least make the AFC Championship game, but They didn't even make the playoffs. They had a great opportunity to make the playoffs in the final game of the season in overtime to Las Vegas. And Brandon Staley still fucked that up. It's just funny to see them clip her up yet again. So anyway, those were my favorite discussions, favorite episodes to do. Also look back on what were your favorite episodes, favorite discussions, favorite talks that I had on Very Cold Lasagna. Let me know. To wrap things up, I just want to talk about what I want to do, to improve this show, what I want to discuss in the next year, and maybe the next 100 episodes if I get to that point. First, I want to talk about what I want to improve, and what I want to bring to the show. Potentially, I may want to try to implement a live portion, like a live streaming portion in the future. Maybe when I do recaps of my San Francisco 49ers like weekly, I don't know. It might help a little bit in terms of, growing the listener base a little bit here on Very Cold Lasagna. But at the same time, I don't know. Maybe I'm just too thinking like an old man, or a outdated person. But I just feel like, I don't know. Maybe I should just continue to grow a little more. But then also at the same time, I want to try to experiment with different things. And sometimes they may not work. Sometimes they may not. They may or may not work out the way I intend to. But maybe some live episodes of the podcast, and then they'll get released a day later on the audio platforms. So live streams on YouTube. And then a day after, it'll get released once I do the editing. Of course, I want to improve the overall presentation when it comes to, when you're watching the YouTube version, and of course the audio. Like I said before earlier in this episode, I'm looking to improve the audio of this of the podcast, because sometimes, when I use this mic, it's a Blue Yeti. It's not the greatest. It's solid, but sometimes it goes like, I'm Very Cold Lasagna. It just sounds like so cluttered. And then last but not least, it's just a more self thing. I want to try to simplify and slow things down a bit. Of course, not to the point where, I'm speaking for almost 2 hours trying to talk about several different things. I'm just looking to slow down and simplify, like, when I talk, because, sometimes when you listen to me, I tend to, ramble so much that I start talking too fast. And it leaves you guys with the impression that I'm just trying to get this over with. So I'm still trying to work on that, and hopefully it comes to a point where I eventually get there, that I make things simple and, do things at a not like much slower pace, but more balanced pace. So some of the things that you can look forward to in terms of potential episode topics is, the NFL draft is coming up. I'm not sure how I want to do it this year. I'm still trying to think if whether or not I want to do a filthy casual scouting this year, or merge it with the filthy casual preview. I might just merge it, just because the NFL draft is literally just 2 weeks away. So we'll see what I want to do in terms of the NFL draft. Obviously you'll get a preview and a recap of the draft. Mainly it's just the first rounds and whatever picks that stand out to me for every team. And then the next couple of months after that will be kind of dry. So maybe less episodes will come out after that, unless I have a very interesting topic. Then we have SummerSlam. Hopefully by then, wrestling will be somewhat intriguing to me. Like, not to a point where, I want to watch this so bad, but hopefully intriguing enough for me to at least talk about it. SummerSlam is going to be in Nashville, in Tennessee. So a little change of pace there, and it's at the end of July. So, and then of course, we have the NFL season in September, so it's still far away, but yeah, big things popping, little things stopping. We obviously have the recaps, weekly recaps, and the picks coming back. Again, trying to find a way to streamline that more. July, hopefully, I'm trying to do like a season preview month before preseason starts. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of moving parts during training camp, but I'm probably not going to focus too much on the training camp portion of that, because by that time, you already have your free agents, your draft picks. Obviously, they're going to be roster cuts, but I think the main storylines are going to be the big players on your roster. So some of the things that I want to discuss within the next couple of months. Try not to look too far ahead. So yeah, that's pretty much the year that was Very Cold Lasagna. And again, I just want to thank each and every one of you for the support and for, helping me stay committed to this journey, this very cold and icy yet spicy journey that has led me to the fridge. And sure, it's not many people yet, but hopefully along the way, as long as I stay committed to it, we can continue to expand the freezer in that very cold fridge. So thank you all again. Get your waters out, get your Kirkland water or whatever water you drink, and chug it down in celebration of 100 episodes in 1 year. One somehow made through year of Very Cold Lasagna. And that is it for this hangover show of Very Cold Lasagna. 100 episodes in the books. I'm your host, DylanLasagna. Thank you for tuning into this fine episode number 100 in this shit-tacular show. Make sure you follow the show, listen to the show wherever you can, however you get your podcasts on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, as well as following me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. And keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of pro wrestling and sports. Icy, ain't spicy, like that Very Cold Lasagna. And here's to the next year of Very Cold Lasagna. Drinks up again. And until next time, peace out.